Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my interview is with Stephanie Farrell, who works with women over the age of 40 to overcome eating disorders. And Stephanie shares her own personal struggle of dealing with complex trauma from childhood and adulthood that led her down a path of eating disorders well into her 40s. And at the time, the cognitive model and the medical model was completely failing her and wasn't working. And it wasn't until she found yoga, mindfulness, movement, matrix reimprinting, and specifically EFT, emotional freedom technique, that her path to healing began. And so Stephanie walks us down a few of the techniques with emotional freedom technique. We talk about the myths and the facts behind eating disorders and how almost all eating disorders are linked to trauma. This is a really informative interview. This isn't a topic I was well versed on, and I learned so much. So I hope you will enjoy it as well. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome today to the Connected Community Podcast. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Hi, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And so your specialty is working with women over 40 that have eating disorders, and you work with mindfulness and movement to help them overcome body image issues and their eating disorders. And I think that this is a topic that isn't really explored as much as it might need to be. And so before we dive into that, I would love for you to share a little bit about your own personal experience and how you landed into this specific niche.
Okay, so growing up, I had some issues, of course, with trauma, and that led to a coping mechanism of bulimia, anorexia, different, vacillations between those two extremes. And I suffered for many years, not knowing how to really get help. I think I was 17. I was part of a support group at a local hospital and was having counseling, but nothing really touched on what was underlying all of these issues for me. So I wasn't hospitalized, although it was threatened. And I regained weight. I went about my way. And for several years, I still had issues in this area. Everything from orthorexia to bulimia to anorexia to overexercise, very obsessive with food and regimes and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I found some of the tools that I use with women that I really was able to heal those deep wounds of the trauma, and also healing those patterns, or repatterning myself, basically.
Mm-hmm. And is your belief that all of these eating disorders that that people have are linked to trauma?
Well, every woman I have worked with has some kind of trauma underneath. So that leads me to believe that, yes, there's something traumatic underneath that actually they need a coping mechanism. And that's their way of coping, is to sort of put it externally onto the body and the body image. People think trauma and they think of like earthquakes and tsunamis and like, losing their whole family or something in a terrible accident. But trauma is really a subjective thing. Two people can go through the same thing, and it may cause one person to be traumatized, and then the other person is not, right? So it could be something like the way you were disciplined, or something someone said. It could just lead you to think differently about yourself and the world around you.
So when you were led to treatment for yourself, was that somebody else leading you to treatment, or did you put yourself there voluntarily?
I didn't. I was about 17. I was in a traumatic accident, a motorcycle accident. And so I had traumatic brain injury. Convalescing there, the atmosphere was something I couldn't control. I couldn't control, the pain that I was in. I couldn't control all of those things. And the anorexia just completely blew up, and I lost so much weight, and was actually very ill. So my mother took me to the hospital to get some treatment for this. But like I said, it didn't really touch on anything underlying what appeared to be, the symptoms. All they would talk to me about was how much I should weigh, how much food I should be eating, and they threatened me with hospitalization had I lost any more weight. So yeah, it was actually traumatizing in a way.
From what my understanding of the treatment centers is that is their goal, is gain weight, lose weight, just kind of get stable and then get out. And it doesn't dive deeper into those concepts of what brought you there and what created that. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's how I feel. I've heard that from many women, and I've heard that from many parents who have called me. My daughter just went through treatment at the local hospital, and I think it was a traumatic experience for her, and she's getting worse now that she's out of treatment. And there's really nothing to address, I believe, women who are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, because this happens, later in life. They don't really talk about any hormonal issues that could be going on. Women who are older have more experience, more life experience, perhaps more traumatic experience, and they have different responsibilities, right?
And so how do you dive deeper into this with them?
First of all, someone has to really be ready to work on things. And usually it's because a certain approach didn't work, or maybe it's just a point in time where they had issues before when they were younger and they have resurfaced. Well, I really like to individualize what I do with people. It's necessary. We're all individual. We all have inner workings that are different. We all have different experiences and perceptions and different tastes for different things. So if one approach isn't working, then I go to another approach. I have many tools in my toolbox, from intuitive eating counseling to energy psychology to the mindfulness part, which is the meditation and yoga nidra, and the yoga itself.
Can you speak a little bit about EFT, what that stands for and how you use it? Because a little confession here, I kind of thought that it was a little bit woo-woo and not really therapeutic, or maybe in somebody's head. And as I've been diving deeper into that topic, I realized that it is backed by science, and it has been proven to be effective for PTSD and trauma and anxiety. And I'm so curious about that modality because I know that you use that modality and I really don't know much about it. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a great tool to have to bring the nervous system back to normal. The vagus nerve goes down the back of the neck, and then it goes down the back, and there's the sympathetic, right? Fight, flight, freeze. But then the parasympathetic, which we think of rest and digest, there's also freeze response. So you can be in fight, flight in the sympathetic, but the parasympathetic is that freeze response. So if you're in freeze response, you're basically like frozen. Nothing's moving. So you're frozen there, but then the fight, flight, you're getting ready, you're running, you're fighting, standing and fighting. So what EFT does, we press on certain acupressure points from ancient Chinese medicine. We also do add the psychology part of it into it in terms of adding in words to describe the person's feelings, experience, etc. But what it does, if you think of the fight flight being up on this bell curve here, and you think of the freeze as just like down in a bell curve, we want to bring the system back to a nice, normal, homeostatic state. And that's what EFT can do. It can help pull you out of that freeze response. I find it's such an overwhelming place to be when nothing moves. Literally nothing in the body is moving, nothing is moving, but it is possible to get out of that.
Mm-hmm. So you're tapping on meridian points on the body, and how are you tapping?
I'm not doing the tapping.
They're tapping themselves.
Yes, yeah, they're tapping on themselves. Unless it's a very extreme case where they've been overcome by great emotion, and that can happen. I've seen that too. But yeah, so they're tapping on themselves. There are different points. If you want me to go with the points, I'm very happy to do that.
Yes, I'm curious where those points are, and how lightly they or firmly they tap, and how long they do it, and how that works, or how quickly you can see a response from that.
Okay, so why don't we do something here then?
Okay.
We'll do a little deep breathing test here, and we'll use EFT, and you can just repeat after me and follow me around with the points. So first of all, I'll show you the tapping points. So this one here is on the side of the hand. It's right between the base knuckle, the pinky finger, and the wrist bone. So right here, and you just use 2 fingers to tap very lightly a couple of times here. Maybe I'm overdoing it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. That's the first point. And that's the side of the hand point. And then we go up here, and the second point here is right where the eyebrow meets the inner edge of the eye, I would say. Here, nice. Very, very gentle. And then you go along the eyebrow, and right here on the outer edge of the eyebrow, there's this little bone here. It's like very tender. So you want to be very careful there. So just tapping a little bit here, 2 or 3 fingers, it's fine. Just a couple times. And then we have under the eye, which is right underneath the eye, and that's very tender too. And then we have under the nose, which is just under the nose, just above the upper lip. The chin, which is just underneath the lower lip, right here. And then we have a collarbone point. So with the collarbone point, I just like to tell someone, tap with 1 hand, 2 hands, just kind of where a man would put his tie, right? Where his tie, right there. Yeah. And then under the arm. So right where a lady would wear a bra strap, under the arm. Last point here is the top of the head. Very tippy top of the head, very gentle again, right there. So those are the tapping points. And there are more. There are different ways we can tap, different places we can tap, but those are the basics.
And how long do they do that? Is it vary depending on how long it takes for their nervous system to calm down?
Well, yes. I mean, this can be an intervention if someone's very anxious, if someone's overcome with emotion or triggered, or the nervous system is, they're in that state. They can use this basic recipe for themselves. Like they can use just tapping even one place. I've known people to tap on like one point in particular that they really feel drawn to. They can do that in times of distress, and it will help to create that balance in the nervous system. But what I do is I want to be very specific with the person about what they're experiencing, what their thoughts are, perhaps working on their actions. So it's really rewiring their system. So it's allowing their system to feel safe. It's also rewiring their neural pathway, right?
So are you saying that you use this technique when somebody's sharing and it's something kind of intense, and it's a way for them to rewire and calm their nervous system? And also you can teach them that when they're triggered, or when they feel anxiety or stress, that it's a way to self-soothe. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. It actually interrupts the pattern too. So if they become aware enough, and first of all, people sometimes are not aware. What's bringing on this binge? Am I going to binge? What am I feeling now? When someone's more aware of that, they can interrupt that pattern with EFT.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, anything actually that could interrupt that pattern and have a moment of inward reflection is a way to break a cycle.
It is. And there are lots of like ways to cognitively do that, but when someone is in that state or they're triggered, it's not, I mean, I think it's not perhaps the best way to come in with like a cognitive
Right.
approach to that. And the energetic approach of EFT, I find really works very well.
Well, they're doing a lot more research too that, and I have a master's in social work, so it's funny that I'm saying this, but the talk therapy model, a lot of times is re-traumatizing for people. It seems like more and more as science is coming out about that it's getting phased out and there's other methods that are coming forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had clients really be re-traumatized by talk therapy and counseling like that. And I've had people they'll have a story, they'll talk about it for 20 years, and it's just completely repressed. Sometimes it's hard to access what's there in order to help them.
What do you do when somebody isn't aware of what's causing these feelings or these urges?
When they're not aware, I'm not going to go digging around for any kind of trauma. We're just going to start where we start and see where it goes. And if the EFT isn't working, I work with yoga and movement and somatosensory yoga. And I also do meditation, which is specific for trauma or creating safety from within. So all of those things, and the intuitive eating counseling, if they want more of a cognitive approach, that's fine. But I do find that most people gravitate toward the EFT and tend to somehow rub up against what that was.
Do you feel like people that have eating disorders have some kind of disconnection from their body?
Oh, yes.
Is that a common thread like throughout?
Yes. Yes, it is. And yes, I can speak definitely from experience. Yeah.
Can you share what that's like?
Yeah. For years, I felt like a floating head. Everything was up here. I was very cerebral. I can remember times, one specific time, I was in a very hot, very athletic class, and I had this feeling like I'm watching everyone around me, and I know I'm doing the movements, and I know I'm keeping up, but I don't feel my body. This is a very strange experience. That was an awareness that I had. I also remember driving my car on the highway and just feeling like I was a head floating, or like a doll or something. That's very disconnected from my body. Not really feeling anything in my body, not really identified with my body in any way.
So what was your personal path to reconnecting with your body and how did that evolve?
Yeah, so the first things that I really found to help me were EFT, emotional freedom technique, because it is a somatic treatment.
Well, how did you find it?
It's funny because I have a degree in homeopathic medicine, so I'm a homeopathic doctor, and I had some colleagues that were actually telling me about this, EFT, the emotional freedom technique. They were doing a little bit of like self tapping and that kind of stuff, and it was working. And I got curious, and when you said it was woo-woo, I was remembering something that I saw like years ago on the internet, and this woman was tapping all over her face, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. But later on, like I said, my colleagues were talking, and I became curious, and I signed up for a weekend workshop, and I had to do it. I just had to do it.
Did you feel that connection in that workshop?
No, it took me a while. And the program that I was part of was amazing because you would learn the theory, you would learn the practicum, you would learn all of these different things and terms and how to use it for other people, but also there was a personal component. You had to do your own work.
Yeah.
So it was when I was doing my own work and that a lot of stuff came up. And working through that.
What kind of stuff, like emotions came up or memories?
Not so much memories for me at first. I had gone through lots of traumatic experiences, not knowing then how they were affecting me, not understanding the disconnection from my body, just thinking it was normal. And yeah, it wasn't so much thoughts, it was more emotions. I would come home from work and I would feel like I was like just in this deep dark hole, just almost buried in emotion, you know.
But that makes sense because you were so disconnected from your body, and now you're doing this and things are opening up, and all of a sudden you're feeling something for the first time. That's probably pretty scary.
It was very, very intensely scary. It was very scary. It wasn't even during the actual tapping in class that this was coming up. It was coming up later. It was coming up when I came home from work. I came to work all day, and then I'm coming home and I'm crying for a good hour on my bed, just not knowing, what was happening inside. Yeah, EFT really helped me process and integrate and really helped me connect with my body. Because trauma, whether you believe it or not, is really, and I've seen this and experienced it, stored in our body.
Yeah, the body keeps score.
Oh, yes. Yes. My favorite book.
Yes.
Yes. It's so profound. I mean, I didn't exactly know what was happening when I was taking my training, but the shaking, and that shaking animal shake, stuff off. We don't.
Energy release.
Right? But yeah, just the profound emotional release and even the imagery that went with it.
They talk about when animals have a trauma or something happens, they have that, they shake, they go, they hide, they crawl into a little hole, they take care of themselves, and then they come back out. But humans, what we do is we just plow forward, we ignore it, we move through it, and we never process it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Even in some of my regular yoga classes, I say, shake your legs, or, give yourself a nice tap somewhere and really get rid of that. It's very profound to release that physically and emotionally at the same time.
So how did you do that without support, or did you have support through that, or were you doing this all on your own?
I had some support. Yes, of course I had support. When I was going to school for EFT, I had a practitioner that was working with me. And I had so many profound shifts. I learned of matrix reimprinting, which is more of an advanced form, working with the inner child, it's very excellent for trauma work. So I had experience there. Some practitioners, and when I was taking my yoga training, I was healing through the training, right? I knew that this is going to help people, and I had to investigate. I had to train in it. I had to get my certification and start getting out there and helping people in the world, because for me it was absolutely life-changing. And then the other tools that I picked up, like the intuitive eating.
I'd love for you to talk about that too. That I'm so curious about intuitive eating and what that means.
Yeah, just very briefly, intuitive eating it's not a diet. It sounds like intuitive, like meditative or mindful eating, and it's not really mindful eating. It's different, but there is a component of mindfulness. in terms of food and eating. But it's a way to really foster a better relationship with food and our bodies. And everyone is individual.
So would an
Everyone is
example be like,
individual.
am I feeling full, or like what would be an example of intuitive eating?
Well, in terms of like, do you know your hunger signals? It's not just a rumbling in the tummy. It could be like a sensation in the head. It could be like a lightheadedness or a sort of a shaky feeling inside, or it could be anything from smelling food and, wanting to eat. It could be a number of things, and people don't really connect those things to hunger, you know?
Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
how that would vary from person to person because everybody's got different ways of figuring that out for themselves.
Yeah, it goes into the emotional side of eating as well. You know, what are you feeling? What do you need right now in the moment? And how can you meet that need? So that's a very cognitive approach. When I marry it with the EFT, it seems to be a little easier for people to do that.
Yeah.
And right? Yeah, as well.
And I've always thought that with eating disorders, it's more tricky than all of the other addictions or impulses that other people have. Because if you have an issue with drinking or drugs, you kind of cut it out of your life. And eating is not something that you can ever walk away from. So if you have a struggle with an eating disorder, it seems like you're faced with it all of the time, day in and day out. Is there a point where it normalizes and you don't have to think about it anymore?
Um, I think that's very individual.
What about your experience with that?
I don't really think about it anymore. I don't. I've been on a long healing journey, and it's not any kind of thing that I really have to think about. But in terms of your comment there, just cutting like drugs or alcohol out of your life, does that really work? If you know Gabor Mate, he's such a wonderful, wise, brilliant man. But he says, it's not what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens. So even if you have a drug addiction or alcohol addiction, or, it could be anything, it could be a shopping addiction, it could be sex addiction. Unless you deal with what's happening on the inside, is that ever going to go away?
And when the women come to you, I'm guessing that they have to overcome a hurdle of shame. Is that a stereotype, or is that something that kind of has to be worked through and the first level and then go to a deeper level?
Yeah, I think there is a certain amount of shame with it. Yeah, there definitely is. And I think there's a lot of self-blame. I think it has a lot to do with self-forgiveness as well. You really have to forgive yourself. And yeah, the shame is definitely there.
And I'm guessing that's what prevents some women from coming forward and even getting treatment. I bet that's one of the biggest barriers to treatment.
It is. It absolutely is. Or the lack of awareness. Some people are still in this like spiral, and they don't really see it.
Or if they got treatment, they got through it, had success for a while, and then, like you said, something happens and they come back to it, then that might feel like a failure, even though it's just a little bit of a setback that has to be worked through.
Exactly. And that's part of it too, is that I want people to take away tools so that in the future they have tools that they can use themselves to help prevent any future setbacks. So I think that's really important. I don't think treatment programs really maybe they give you tools, but I don't think that they're the most useful tools.
Right. Their goals are a little bit different than your goal. Your
Cool.
goal is to get to the root of the problem, to get them connected with their body, to kind of work through some of these things and come to a self-realization. In the treatment program, they're wanting them to gain weight, lose weight, kind of say what they're supposed to say, and then get out.
Yeah, it's jumping the hoops, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it really is. But I provide that sort of root cause treatment for people.
Mm-hmm. What are some misconceptions about eating disorders that you found?
Well, I think that one, when people think of eating disorders, they think of the typical white young woman, teenager or something. But eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes and socioeconomic backgrounds, and just people would not think that you could be in a bigger body and have anorexia,
Mm-hmm.
but you can.
Mm-hmm.
Many people do.
I think people do picture young women in their 20s and then it not affecting an older population. So I think it's interesting that you're bringing this information forward to an older population. I imagine that when people are in their 20s, somebody's pushing them to treatment, they might not be going because they brought themselves there. And when somebody's coming in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they're ready to take that on and tackle it. That takes a lot of courage. It takes some insight. You can't heal until you're ready to heal and look at some of that ugliness. And um, a lot of people aren't ready to do that. It's scary. It's difficult. And but it's the only way to heal any trauma. All
Mhm.
trauma has to be dealt with. And I do believe when you say like we hold that trauma in our body, I don't have an eating disorder, but I have an experience of holding trauma in my body and what it's like to do that for years and to get it out. And it's unhealthy and it's scary and it's hard and it takes courage for anybody. And for these women to step forward and come to you, I think that takes a ton of courage.
Huge courage. And, I think that, you know, like you said earlier, the shame.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more courageous to reach out than to have, to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Me.
And what is the reason that they usually come forward? Is it because like medically they're having issues, or do they just like what do you find is their motivation? Is it to heal? Is it for health reasons? Is it varied?
I think it's more there's something under this that needs to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
These things are coming up again. I don't understand what it is. Um, and it's not just the weight, it's not just the appearance, it's not that. There's something underneath this.
Mm-hmm. And they're
And
ready.
I can't really I need help. I
Yeah.
need different help than maybe I got before.
And
You know.
especially because there's that disconnection with the body. And so that process of reconnecting with your body and reconnecting with feelings and emotions, that's a big hurdle. And to be ready for and to dive into. Do you have people that come and then it's just a little too scary and they back out, or do you find most people are willing, like they're ready to go there with you?
I think if they start working with me, they're ready to go there.
Yeah.
They're ready. Um, I'm like I said, I'm not digging for these deep traumas. I'm not, I'm very aware and intuitive about where someone is in their journey.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I do is tailored completely to them. Their path is totally unique,
Mm-hmm.
and I respect that, and I understand that. Yeah.
And your journey, what was the hardest hurdle for you?
Well, I had a lot of deep kind of childhood wounds, and impactful things happen. I was actually in a quite abusive relationship that perpetuated things.
Mm-hmm.
It really it was very triggering. It perpetuated and deepened my disordered eating and my patterns. I mean, that's what I was, turning to. So I think that was a huge struggle to get over it. And all the pain that comes with breakups, and you're thinking, you're feeling like you love this person, or
Mm-hmm.
and just losing yourself in that person. It was an
Mm-hmm.
abusive relationship, narcissistically abusive. So it was very difficult in that sense. But, it just was, it was really unhealthy for me as a person, and particularly a person who's suffered with trauma and had, suffered with eating disorders for many years. It just perpetuated things, made it much, much worse. So,
But how incredibly empowering for you to have walked away from that and to stand into your power and to know that that's right and do it despite how difficult it was.
it was a process. It was
Right?
a
It
process.
didn't
Yeah.
happen overnight. And that's the thing I think that's really good for people to remember too, is that things don't happen overnight. And it's kind of like a little bit of a roller coaster. There's not just this upward slope of healing. There's a lot of up and down and in between and circling around. And then you think you're done and it kind of comes back up again and you have to deal with it in a different way. I don't think we just have something come up, we deal with it, and then it's gone forever. And it can be. I think that there can be deep, deep, deep healing, but that doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. I mean, people talk about like miracle wonder EFT, right? And it may happen in one session with something. And I've had years of panic attacks go away in 3 sessions, gone
Wow,
completely.
amazing.
But this is not something that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This can take time,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly when we've had years and years of this pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Repatterning the brain, the neural networks, it takes
Mm-hmm.
time. It takes
Mm-hmm.
time to practice. It takes commitment to practice.
They'll probably come in, they're like, how many sessions? I want to do 8 sessions. I want to be fixed. And this is how you're going to do it. And maybe one person takes 8 sessions and one takes 18 or 80.
Yeah,
Depending on how ready they are and depending on how deep things are and depending on what methods work the best.
absolutely.
I just love talking to you. I've learned so much. I don't know a lot about this topic and I find it super fascinating. And I think you have something incredible to share. And so tell people how they can find you in any other offerings that you might not have mentioned.
I do offer the one-on-ones. I believe it's 3 or 5 sessions. I like to start off with that anyway. I have some free tools on my website. It's www.stepheniefarrell.com, and that's STEPHENIEFARRELL.com. You can reach out at hello@stepheniefarrell.com by email. And I'm, just love to hear from people. I have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram. It's at Stephanie_Farrell_. And you can find me on Facebook too.
And I'll put all these links in the show notes so people can find you and work with you, hopefully, if they have some issues that they need
Wonderful.
some help with. Yeah. This has
Thanks so
been
much.
so interesting. And I'm so glad that you're doing this work and helping so many people. And you're so knowledgeable about so many different treatment modalities, movement modalities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to share everything. So.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nikkiyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.